Welcome and good morning or good afternoon to the folks who are joining us today on the first Canadian Ironworker Call to Safety webinar. In this new realm of a business environment where face-to-face meetings, travel, and conferences are on a hold pattern, webinars are proving to be a method of engaging participants in a thought-provoking discussion and providing learning opportunities. This webinar will provide a forum for the Canadian ironworker leaders to have a real-time conversation about safety and health in the ironworker industry specific to Canada. Today's webinar topics range from introducing safety and health initiatives, discussing specific provincial or regional legislation, and dialoguing around ways to increase safety performance. Our objective is to take the information gained today and hold future events for each provincial region, offering partner contractors, local unions, and ironworker members the opportunity to discuss their pain points and successes relating to safety and health. Before we introduce our panel and guest speakers, I will take you through a couple of features of this Ring Central webinar. Next slide, please. So today you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Wayne Cressup, District Representative with the Ironworkers International Safety and Health Department, will assist today in preparing and relaying questions. Please say hello to us, Wayne, coming live from Ohio. You also may wish to chat amongst, Wayne, are you there?
Fantastic.
There you are.
I'm here.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning. Doing well, thank you.
Good. So you may also wish to chat amongst other participants. In order to do this, please use the chat button only. Type your comments and dialogue between each other. So if you wish to ask the question of the panel, just simply click on the Q&A button and type in your question and submit. Wayne will be going through the questions and we'll have an opportunity to answer those questions as we go along. Also behind the scenes today, we have other members of the Ironworkers Safety and Health team, Christy Rose, located in Illinois, and Sandy Lustuka, joining us from Alberta, assisting us with the technology and keeping things rolling. Thank you very much for your time. Christy, could you please bring up the poll question? So our first poll question is, which of the following best describes your current role? And there are 4 options there. So on your screen, you'll see a pop-up. Go ahead and answer. I'll give you a few moments to enter that. And it looks like we've just about completed. We'll give it a few more seconds. So once the poll is completed, we'll end the polling. And as you see displayed on your screen, we've got the results. So we have a large representation of union representatives, contractors. We have some union members, and also a pleasure to have our owner and client representatives join us today. Thanks very much. So next slide. So at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Steve Rank, Executive Director of Safety and Health, Ironworkers International, joining us from California. Steve has set forward the momentum for our department's work in Canada, not only to mention leading us through the world of COVID and other safety and health issues. Please welcome Steve Rank. Steve?
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, everybody. Actually, my computer just went down there. I don't know if you guys can see me or not.
Yeah, we can see you, Steve.
Okay, my screen went blank. Well, welcome everybody. I just wanted to say thanks, and this whole initiative is to reach out to our Canadian ironworkers, our local unions, our district councils, our contractors, and our owners to kind of do a mirror image of what we have been doing in the United States. And we didn't want our Canadian brothers and sisters and contractors to feel like they're always following secondhand on what we're doing in the lower 50. So we want to provide the same services, same opportunity to raise the standard of safety performance throughout Canada. And I can't think of a better person to facilitate that than Jeff Norris, with the help of all the Kevin and all the district council presidents to reach out. And today's call is just a springboard of upcoming services. And once the word gets out that Jeff is doing this on a periodic basis, he's going to find specific issues within each province to where he could have a specific call with Ontario and involving Jack and his Employers Association and other provinces to be able to address specific issues in each province. And that's always been a tough battle for Jeff, as each province is different across Canada. So this format will allow him to better communicate with all affected parties on issues that are going on within their province. It also gives a chance to address much needed regulatory issues that we'll talk about later on here, things that we've learned from the steel erection and reinforcing steel standards that we've been able to obtain here in the United States that have been proven effective to preventing fatalities and disabling injuries. Next slide, please. When the COVID-19 broke, we had to find a better way to communicate with our members, local unions, and contractors. And we had a problem with everything going through headquarters, the safety department, or the impact office, and there was a delay in getting messages. So we established, with the help of everyone in the safety department, an 800 number that you see on the screen here, as well as an email address where you can notify Jeff, Wayne, Christy, Sandra, or myself, and we can get back to you within the same day. So this has helped to expedite our services to everyone. So please make note of these numbers or call us later on if you need more information. Next slide, please. Okay, Jeff, I think it's back to you now for Kevin Bryanton, I believe. Jeff?
Okay, I'll just take it away. Thanks for the introduction, Steve, the pass off there. And thanks for everything you do. For everybody who is a first-time attendee here, Steve's been around as our Health and Safety Director, Executive Director for the International for well over 15 years, I believe. Done a fantastic job there in terms of representing the ironworkers' interests across both countries and going to bat for our members. And as well, thanks, Jeff, for everything you did to prepare. Jeff's the Canadian version of Steve up here in Canada. It comes from a trades on the trades background and apprenticeship instructor and everything, and worked as well through various safety profiles on the tools and for contractors. And it's just been a super valued asset for the Canadian staff and everything he does. So thanks for putting that together today. This will be one, as Steve had mentioned, of many to come here over the next time in terms of when we can get back to regular meetings in person. We're going to be continuing to offer these types of interfaces going forward on topical items for Canadian, and then potentially regionalize it as was stated. So we're giving this one a whirl as our first crack here in Canada, and it's as interactive as can be. So if you have questions, as they said, please pop them up, and I'll chime in later. But it's my pleasure to introduce our General President, Eric Dean, to kind of kick this off and then get down to the meat and potatoes of our presentation. So with that, I'll pass it on to the host controllers to get my face off of there and get our General President up there. Thanks very much.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, depending on which part of the country you're in. I just wanted to welcome you and tell you how important the emphasis that our leadership places on safety. It's no secret, if you look at the Ironworker magazine monthly, we have an article towards organizing, apprenticeship training, and dedicated to safety. And the reason is we can say at headquarters, like we want to embody culture and a spirit of safety, but we know that safety is really in the employers, our members, our rank and file members, and our local union leaders' hands. So the culture really works the best. I saw that there's some owner clients on. When the owner starts telling people, you can't come on my project unless you're dedicated to safety, that sends a message to the employers, the rank and file members, and the local union leadership. We've centered our core curriculum around our apprenticeship and journeyman instruction in both countries based on navigating jobs safely, being compliant with regulatory issues. And I'm proud to say that in 2011, I went to headquarters as general secretary, and I spoke with then President Walter Wise and talked about Steve Ranka is one person. You know, you can't, I was the ornamental director. You can't cover North America adequately as one person, and specifically to have Canadian content. So really pleased with Jeff, the addition of Wayne, and the additional staff in the office to facilitate the needs of our membership. So a lot of our safety instruction is delivered through the apprenticeship training and journeyman upgrading, but much of our safety culture is practiced on the job. And the regulatory issues, whether it be out in the Maritimes, out west, on a big industrial job, or in an urban environment, it doesn't matter if you're in the United States or Canada, we're facing and addressing the same safety concerns. So I wanted to thank the employers for the care you give and taking time to be on this call, the equipment and the time and the resources you provide our members so that they can work safely. I'd like to thank our members for taking the initiative to be leaders and drive safety on the job site, to make sure one simple thing, that we all go home every day intact the same way we left for work. And in addition, the labor leaders, I can't ask you enough to make sure that you're keeping our people safe, keeping that framework on the front burner, whether it be talking to apprentices in the school, talking to members at rank and file meetings, or visiting job sites when you place stewards, to make sure that we're being there. Now, Steve touched a little bit, and Jeff, about COVID, and it's drastically changed the ability to get to people, to network. My job is, you know, external outreach, meeting other unions, owner clients, colleagues in the building trades, building a better labor movement. This is it now. I'm a professional Zoomer now, but I happen to be at home, so you excuse my casual dress. I had some personal things I had to take care of this morning, but nothing is as too important than to be on this first inaugural Canadian safety call. And I just want to thank our staff, Kevin and his team, Colin, Jimmy. They're running great district councils, and all of you local union leaders. I appreciate what you do, but you got to make sure that we strive for zero incidents. And remember, if you see something, tell the members to say something. Let's address a concern if we know better, rather than letting it go and saying, boy, I really should have said something. And with that, I'll let the subject matter experts talk, and I'll get out of the way and just thank you all for participating.
Jeff, if you could please introduce, after your moment of reflection, James and the other council presidents, I appreciate it.
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce James Buisson, President of the Ironworkers District Council of Eastern Canada, and Colin Daniels, President of the Ironworkers District Council of Western Canada. Both of these gentlemen bring a wealth of experience from both serving apprenticeships, their field service on the tools, and as supervisors, and now into their roles as leaders for the Ironworkers International. And if I could just have James and Colin activate their video, please.
Hello,
Morning,
everybody.
Colin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good morning,
Hello,
everybody.
Jimmy.
Good to see everybody on this call. Thanks for everybody joining, and I look forward to a productive webinar this morning with what Jeff's got prepared. And thank you for the opportunity to be in on this thing.
Thank you for joining us, Colin.
Thank you
Jimmy?
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff, to be on the call webinar. I really appreciate to showing our leadership at the international level. Thank you again for that invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. Great, great. So I'm going to turn this back over to Steve just to talk a little bit about the deadly dozen activities and hazards. Steve?
Thanks, Jeff. One of the things that we were quick to learn whenever I had an opportunity to take over the safety department was our members are having fatalities. We're having fatalities and disabling injuries from the same 10 or 15 activities. And I know it sounds cliche, but the deadly dozen hazards holds true. It seems like it's the same activities that are producing the same fatalities and disabling injuries. And the real question is what are we going to do about it? Go to the next slide, please. Wayne, we've learned that unprotected floor openings is one of the deadly dozen hazards. And I regret that one of the fatalities that we had about 6 weeks ago was a result of an unprotected floor opening. Next slide. Same holds true for open web steel joist. And you know, our members that go from the big structural job in downtown Toronto onto a beam and a bar joist job or a joist girder joist job, there's a whole different set of hazards dealing with open web steel joist that cannot be overlooked. And it remains one of the deadly dozen hazards, particularly collapse of open web steel joists. Next slide. On the left-hand picture, you'll see inadequate fall protection. We have people that are making homemade stanchion posts out of bridge clamps and 1.5 by 1.5 tube steel that will not withstand the fall rest forces if anybody was to fall in it. And I'm really sorry to say that this was actually the fall rest system with 5 ironworkers tied on a bridge girder over a river. And if anybody would have fallen into this system here, that system would have failed and probably would have jerked all 5 of them down to the bottom of that river. So I went to this job site and I could not believe what I was seeing. So that remains the improper use or the lack of use of fall protection equipment in the workplace. Next slide, please. Rough laying of decking. Decking by activity remains our #1 deadly dozen hazard by activity. The rough laying of deck, not getting the endos, not getting the sheet laps when we rough lay them in a bay is constituted to falls in a workplace. Next slide. Material handling. We've had, unfortunately, in the shops, we've had material handling fatalities with offloading bridge girders, but we've also had material handling fatalities with respect to rebar assemblies like you see here that are pre-built. We've had material handling fatalities on the job site with offloading trucks, with shifting iron. And so material handling injuries remains one of the deadly dozen hazards that we're constantly working with our people on about being a qualified or certified rigger and working with other people in handling these types of loads. Next slide. Structural collapse due to anchor bolt failure. One of the things that we're talking with Jeff about, and it's been a problem everywhere, are columns fabricated and designed with 2 bolt connections, base plates. It's been a standard since 2001 in the United States that all columns shall be anchored with a minimum of 4 anchor bolts. And more specifically, if there's been any modifications or changes to those anchor bolt systems, the steel erector must be notified. On top of that, we've had concrete strength issues where anchor bolts have pulled out because the concrete's still green. So those are all things that have contributed to structural collapse, whether it's 2 bolt columns, insufficient concrete strength, or altered or modified anchor bolts where they laid them out wrong, they cut them off, they re-drilled them, and they didn't install the epoxy right. And so this remains a structural collapse, deadly dozen hazard. Next slide, please. Then we get in the reinforcing steel industry, overloading decks. And one of the things that we've done here in the last few years in the United States is we're really pleased that we were able to obtain a national ANSI standard on reinforcing steel and post-tensioning. And I'll be working with Jeff on that. Next is struck by injuries with falling objects. We have a long-standing standard here in the United States since 2001 that general contractors and controlling contractors are prohibited from scheduling people beneath the steel erectors and the ironworkers performing structural steel work. But unfortunately, what we've seen is people will want to adhere to the accelerated job schedules, and they'll schedule in other trades working beneath us, which creates falling object hazards. So that's something that we want to address throughout Canada as well. Next slide. Also, caught between injuries and fatalities. We've had some disabling injuries with our members getting caught between the outriggers on cranes and offloading trucks and being in the blind spot, being in a bad spot where boom deflection and like the case you see right here, if there's any boom deflection, if there's any delay in stopping swing or stopping the hoist line coming in, it could wipe this member out real quick. So avoiding these kind of caught between injuries is also a deadly dozen hazard. Next slide. Also impalement. Just last week, unfortunately, I heard that we had a member back on the East Coast that had to be life flighted as a result of being impaled by rebar. And rebar impalement protection is problematic because our reinforcing ironworker could install the impalement covers on it, but other trades working in the area can come around and knock them off, not maintain them. So the question is who's going to maintain these protective coverings over rebar dowels when our members leave the work area? And that's something that we specifically addressed in our reinforcing standards here under ANSI, California OSHA, and soon to be Washington OSHA, effective October 1st of this year. We have instituted what they call a custody of fall impalement, or excuse me, a custody of impalement covers, meaning there has to be a chain of custody. When we leave that area, someone is going to maintain them, and it will not be rebar contractor. Next slide. Also, electrical hazards. Unfortunately, we've gotten into power lines over the years. In many cases, in these congested downtown areas, we're being forced to assemble cranes to hoist loads that are near and close to high energy power lines. That's a time where we have to stop as a contractor, as a foreman or supervisor, and say, no, we need to have this evaluated. We need to de-energize these lines if necessary. And there needs to be a protocol for working beneath, around, or even over power lines, okay? So there's specific requirements for that here in the United States that we want to share with you folks up there in Canada. Next slide. Also, we can't overlook heat illness. We have 2 pending fatalities this year, and one of them could be directly related to heat illness. We're waiting for the coroner's report to come back, but heat illness is a real thing. It is a deadly dozen hazard. I regret that we've had members in the past that have succumbed to heat illness. The first thing that can happen when it's 100 degrees and the humidity is 90% is that heat can have you have a heart attack. It can create a stroke or a heart attack that will kill you. But the root causation factor here in this heat illness is heat illness. Same thing with toxic exposures and chemicals and airborne contaminants. I just want to say that Wayne and Jeff have been very helpful in rolling out our voluntary welding fume program to our employers, that if they need testing done, if they need help and assistance in procuring PPE, we're there to help them. So manganese is a problem. Long-term exposure and getting manganism is certainly a hazard and something we have to address. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Steve. So we do have a question from our viewing audience. The Deadly Dozen posters have been around for a while. Have we seen any improvements over the past 5 years, Steve?
Improvements in fatalities, yes. We, through all of our driving down on everything we've been doing, we've had less falls through floor openings. Okay, we've had less issues with getting into the power lines. We've had far less reinforcing steel and post tensioning fatalities in general. So it has made a difference. You know, when our members get on the job site, they have a decision to make when they fall into these situations on whether they're going to keep working or if they're going to see something, say something. So the answer to your question is yes, Jeff. We've gotten many calls from members and local unions where they saw something, they did something, and they've reached out to us. The answer is yes.
All right, thank you, Steve. So next slide there, Wayne, please. So in Canada, for the benefit of people that are on the webinar, Canada is broken up into 3 jurisdictions within the Ironworkers realm: Western Canada, Ontario, and Eastern Canada. So if I could have the district council presidents just activate their video and their microphones. Just want to get some comments about where we are in terms of the landscape in Canada. Next slide, please. So Colin, out in the west, from the west coast across the prairies up to our borders of Ontario, what's the landscape in Canada right now in terms of work picture, safety, health? What are you hearing out there?
Well, it's no surprise that portions of Western Canada, I cover from Manitoba to BC, and we're seeing a big spike in work in British Columbia with the takeoff of the Kitimat and the LNG projects. So there's going to be ample opportunities for people to go to work there, but due to the global pandemic, it's put a slow start to these projects due to them being remote locations and dealing with work camps and the amount of people that they have traveling in and out of these work camps. So it's limited takeoff on these projects. The trickle-down effect has affected a lot of the other provinces as well with this global pandemic, with the start times on projects. We're seeing shutdowns being pushed, sometimes totally postponed, not even going to happen this year. And they're doing some projects with half the amount of people that they would normally do. But for the most part, we're seeing things starting to pick up. Obviously, oil is a big concern in Alberta with the prices being as low as they are. But that in turn has created opportunities for us in wind energy and other types of energy purposes like that. So we're starting to hold our own again. We're starting to see the light at the end of this tunnel, and we're excited to see what happens here this fall with the amount of work that's scheduled on the go. So as far as health goes, I mean, the similar problems that we've been dealing with throughout our existence here, and with the amount of people on these projects creates a lot of congestion and stuff like that. So, I mean, if we're working safely, it reflects in our numbers. And I think the Ironworkers have been leading the charge as far as the building trades goes. And I'm pretty happy to report that our numbers are quite low on any incidents coming out of the West.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Colin. And we're going to have an opportunity a little later on in the webinar to dialogue specifically about safety and health. I'll move on to see that Jimmy's up on the screen. Jimmy, how are things in your backyard?
Well, on my side, everything is fine. Work situation, it's been very slow on different province. I can start with Quebec. Right now, it's very busy. We use because of the pandemic, we've been shut down for 6 weeks. If I remember right, we took a hit, but right now everybody came back in force. Everybody keep everything working safe. The CNSST have established the norms and protocol with all the building trades to make sure, to ensure the security of the worker. No, we don't have any jobs on that side who's been postponed or canceled. If we go in Nova Scotia, work situation right now would say 70–80% of the workforce is working right now. All the project we've been working on right now, it's all almost rebar reinforcing. It's been very strong. Structural is a little bit slower. Eventually, it's going to come up. Also on that side, we had no member on a COVID-19 contracted, and we've been very unfortunate. We didn't have anybody on that side who caught that virus. I'm really happy to hear that. And also, we have a local 842 in New Brunswick. Things been very slow right now. They probably have 40% of the local working. We're trying to get people working outside the province, but the problem we have right now, only the athletics, the 4 provinces been open for the COVID-19. We cannot send people over different province to go to work. That's a pretty problematic problem right now for us. Also have local 764, major big problem, 10% right now of the workforce working. We had a big shutdown from Agentia project. It's been postponed so far, what we have heard so far because of the price of oil. Hopefully things gonna get back on their feet really soon. No, on that side also we have no case of COVID, thank God. And also right now we're trying to look at the possibility to send people over different local and make them work. So this is my work report. And yeah, if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Jimmy. And I see that Kevin's video is up now. Can you hear us, Kevin?
Yep, I'm good to go. Can you hear me?
Yes. How's Ontario doing?
Ontario's actually doing very well. They were, prior to the COVID shutdowns, trucking along with gas, and haven't really had any kind of recess in our employment for quite some time, multiple years. So when COVID came along, Ontario's construction sector was deemed an essential service, and really the only hiccup was the job site adjustments that needed to be undertaken to comply with distancing and finding the proper PPE. So we may have, we weren't officially ever down outside of the same kind of things Colin was talking about, the high density, low egress, low access job sites with multiple trades, where just getting the sheer number of people, volume of them into the work area was an issue. So those few sites had their issues over a couple of weeks, got sorted out and moved on, and we're basically, you know, at or near 90% employment across the province right now as we speak, and are taking travelers. So they made the adjustments in the first month and have carried on to a robust Ontario economy with lots of infrastructure projects, industrial, power sector, transit. So it's booming.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that report. I'm going to take over the presentation here for a short bit and speak particularly about some of the standards, the legislation programs that we have in Canada. I'm going to start off with going back to a time. And if we could advance this slide. Thank you. In the 1800s, economic depression and industry practices brought worsening conditions for working Canadian men, women, and children who were forced to toil longer hours for smaller wages under conditions that included a lack of health regulations, safety codes, welfare, or access to compensation. employers are generally not responsible for providing compensation or care for injured workers. The occupational health and safety in Canada can be traced back to the late 19th century when the Workmen's Compensation for Injuries Act in 1886, of Ontario was introduced, establishing the basis for safety standards. And over the many decades, improvements were made, slow but sure. And into the 70s, the Ontario government formed the Royal Commission on Health and Safety of Workers in Mines, which articulated into key workers' rights, which continue to form a basis for the current OHS programming that we have in Canada. And OHS in Canada is regulated under a variety of mechanisms, including acts, codes, standards, guidelines, and these instruments outline the general rights and responsibilities of the employer, the supervisor, and the worker. The scope of OHS legislation varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction within each province and territory, publishing its own specific regulations, which makes it quite unique in comparison to our folks south of the border, where we have a federal OSHA standard with state standards within OSHA. As such, all 14 jurisdictions in Canada, 1 federal, 10 provinces, and 3 territorial have their own OHS legislation. And this system makes legislation changes specific to our industry more challenging. Throughout the 1990s into the 2000s, we witnessed an explosive growth of interest in the psychology of health and safety and its relevance to the causation and prevention of unsafe acts. Alongside industry discussions about risk assessment, experts began discussing issues such as behavioral science, human error, human and organizational factors, and how companies striving for an ultimate solution in continuous improvement should go about measuring how well they're managing their occupational health and safety. With increasing numbers of specialists and consultants claiming expertise on how to manage health and safety, and the subject beginning to attract the attention of academics, the regulators saw its role as leading an examination. And based on the knowledge gained from case studies conducted over a number of years, the methods set out in guidance were soon widely acknowledged as helpful and effective in raising safety performance. Subjects like fall protection, welding fume, ergonomics had long been seen as relevant to safety and health working relationships, and with the application of a solution to challenges through technological advances, industry involvement, or to simply better understand the relationship between man and machine. So interest in corporate governance was stimulated, and health and safety and environment began emphasizing the importance of visible leadership by senior managers within company structures, ideally appointing a champion on their boards of directors or taking an active role as a COO, a CEO, president, etc. So going into the future and beyond, the growing sophistication of occupational health and safety has led to the development of standards, laws, and regulations, which would not have been possible without the close study of methods leading by our companies and by our union. So during our numerous site visits, tours, presentations, as we travel across North America in the last number of years, we've noticed a lot of change in the realm of safety and health. And I believe that this is because of the partnership that we've formed between our contractors and our union. So we believe as an organization that the science of safety begins with that bold step that Eric Dean mentioned, and that's to see something and to say something. So engaging in the changing of history involves every member to work in partnership with our signatory contractors to help shape safety into something inclusive of production and quality. And it is just part of getting the job done. Next slide, please. So we've got a poll question. I'm going to ask that take the opportunity to read the question, which is, in the regions where you work, the occupational health and safety legislation regulations, do they exceed industry needs, meet industry needs, require improvement to meet industry needs, or does not meet the industry needs? Take a moment to answer that poll. It looks like we've got an average here of meeting the industry needs. Surprisingly, 52% of you indicated that, although 38% have indicated that requires improvement to meet those industry needs. So this is something that we want to be involved with our contractors in order to look at those regulations in your jurisdiction and make those necessary lobbies to the applicable government officials to make changes that would be better serving our industry. Next slide. So if we look back to our journey, and on the graphic, you've got the axis, which is the industry injury frequency. There's a very common formula in the industry that calculates the TRIR. And prior to 2000, 20 years ago, our injury frequencies were quite high. So with fundamental approaches like legislation and enforcement, and then through time, commitment to fundamentals such as alcohol and drug programs, best practices, other tools, and having sophisticated safety and health management systems, policies, procedures, we've been able to bring that curve down to a level that's acceptable risk, but still it's in everybody's desire to get to that zero. And we're looking at specialized approaches to include items that I discussed before about human factors, behaviors, cultural alignment, and looking at supervision and training and assessing competence. Next slide. So this is a chart. To just put this simply in here, it comes from the Association of Workers' Compensation Boards of Canada. And it's just a simple way to show you that no surprise that trades as an occupational group have the highest number of lost time claims in the country. Next slide. So when we go back in time, in 1913, there was an Ontario lawyer and politician, Sir William Meredith, who tabled what was called the Meredith Report. In doing so, he laid the foundation for the system of workers' compensation in Canada. Going forward, a century later, workers' compensation legislation across the country is guided by the principles of that report. And Canadian workers' compensation organizations are also very likely to be involved in workplace injury prevention and in supporting workers and employers in return to work, and mandates variety across the country. But the Meredith principles remain a common thread throughout the Canadian landscape of workers' compensation. There are 5 basic concepts that underlie most workers' compensation legislation in Canada today, known as the Meredith principles. And those are no-fault compensation, which means that workers are paid benefits regardless of how the injury occurred. Security of benefits, which means a fund is established to guarantee funds exist to pay those benefits. A collective liability, which means that covered employers on the whole share liability for workplace injury insurance. And the independent administration, meaning that the organizations who administer workers' compensation insurance are separate from government. And 5th basic concept is the exclusive jurisdiction, which means that only workers' compensation organizations provide workers' compensation insurance. So these are the principles that are historic compromises in which employers fund the workers' compensation systems across the country, and injured workers in turn surrender their right to sue their employer for their injury. Next slide. So I want to move on to safety associations. They've been in existence for decades, some dating back to the 1980s. And the Confederation, Canadian Confederation of Construction Safety Association works as an umbrella organization for provincial and territorial construction safety associations, with a shared interest in promoting awareness of construction safety and health, improving information sharing, and collaboratively producing workplace health and safety training standards. And it's also a great place for informational resources. So each province and territory has representation for the construction industry, and it's worth noting for our folks that are from the manufacturing and fabrication industry that there are other organizations related to safety specific to the manufacturing, such as the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of British Columbia and the Alberta Manufacturers Health and Safety Association. So these associations can be a valuable resource for contractors and union representatives in your areas of safety and health. If you have the interest, these associations have opportunities to engage as a committee or board member, and we can provide that information. And I'm going to provide an example a little later in this webinar about relationship. Time for another poll. If you could bring up the next question. Do you have written programs as part of your safety and health management system? Yes, no, and not sure. Looks like we got a vast majority, and I'm pleased to see that 94% of you have indicated that yes, you have a written program. Those of you that maybe answered no, the 3% and the 3% that weren't sure, it's worth noting that the Ironworkers through the impact programs have sample written programs. We're going to be working with Steve's department on looking at ways that we can amend those programs so that they're more relevant to Canadian contractors. And part B of that poll, next question is contractors, is your safety and health program CORT certified? Yes, no, not sure. What is certificate of recognition? Wow, again, surprised me with 70% saying that they have CORT certification that are participating today, 25% saying no, not yet, or not sure, 5%. Next slide, please. So the Certificate of Recognition Program is an occupational safety and health accreditation program that verifies a fully implemented safety and health management system that's meeting national standards. So the objective of CORT is to provide industry employers with an effective system to reduce incidents, accidents, injuries, as well as their associated human and financial costs. CORT is now frequently used as a pre-qualifying and/or condition of contract by both private and public project owners across the country. And CORT is nationally trademarked and endorsed by the Canadian Federation of Construction Associations. Although CORT is a national standard, the certification must be attained in the province or territory that you're working in or you're operating under. Next slide, please. So on your screen, you've got a list of benefits for the employers. There are many signatory employers that have resources and budget to allocate a consistent focus on safety management programs, although arguably there are equal or a better number of employers who are classified as small employers. Now, these companies may not have the resources to allocate to a similar focus. So we all need someone in our professions that we can reach out for guidance. And this week, I actually had the opportunity to discuss the CORT and also the ISO 45001 programs and some of the general pain points and successes with a number of safety directors involved in our industry. And their comments were appreciated as it provided a perspective on how safety programming is so varied across our industry. Shout out to Shelley Bidlock and Diana Kemp, who gave us some really great points about summarizing the pros and cons of these systems and these programs. The CORT program allows a structured guideline for contractors to follow and assist in the development and maintenance of a safety and health management systems, inclusive of policies and procedures, et cetera, supporting regulatory requirements of legislation and keeping people accountable, and providing safe and healthy workplaces for our members. Shelley put it in a way that most can understand. She said, safety management is like automobile insurance policies. You only need it when you need it. And that really kind of hit home with me. Next slide, please. So moving on to competent and qualified, we have to look at what is competency. Next slide. When we look at competency, it's a capability of being a human being. So it's one that we had, through advancement of getting older and bringing on new skills and knowledge, which characterizes our competency. So it's something that has to be acquired. And next slide, if we look at what a competent person is, and this is something that quite honestly differs between the United States and Canada. Competent person is generally defined as one who has knowledge, training, and experience to complete tasks with limited supervision or no supervision. And that term is used throughout OHS legislation, standards, and many documents. And in the United States, a competent person is also defined as one who is capable not only of identifying existing and predictable hazards or surroundings or working conditions that are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, but they actually have the authorization to take prompt corrective measures. So that's built into the OSHA. Next slide, please. When we look at qualifications, a qualified person is one who, by possession of a recognized degree, a certificate, professional standing, but through their training and experience, has successfully demonstrated their ability to solve or resolve problems. So there is a difference between competency qualifications, and the last slide here in this deck under this topic of certifications. So Wayne, if you could please advance that. A certification is a formal procedure by which an accredited or authorized person or agency assesses and verifies the attributes, qualities, characteristics, qualifications of an individual. And what we see a lot of times is through our training programs, we have certifications that are issued to our members. And I've got an example of one there on the screen, which is the, we call the Riggers ticket. And in Canada, that is tied directly to the National Occupational Analysis through the Interprovincial Red Seal program. Next slide. So I've got a question for you. Poll question is, the apprenticeship and training program meets the needs of the contractor relating to safety and health education? Strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Okay, excellent. So it looks like we've got some positive things that are going on, but we also may have some work ahead of us. So thank you for answering that. Next slide. So when we look at the apprenticeship program and journeyman upgrading programs, we are consistently and constantly changing. Apprenticeship programs traditionally had a lot of technical nature built into them. And what we're very cognizant of and working with our apprenticeship and training department at headquarters is to implement more safety and health education into the apprenticeship program because culture is learned, and studies have found that workplace related disasters are a result of a breakdown in an organization's policies and procedures that were established to deal with safety. And that breakdown flows from inadequate attention being paid to safety issues. So getting in front of young, maybe not young in age, but young ironworkers new to the trade, and also building on those that have experiences and shaping that organizational culture is important to the ironworkers and want to align with the company culture as well. Next slide. So again, I talked about apprenticeship, but there's also the journeyman upgrading. Journey people are requiring constant upgrading. And what I've noticed personally over the years is that a lot of this education, it does relate to safety and health, and getting certifications is, yes, definitely part of that. But it's also building on those skills and knowledge, and not just about having a ticket. Next slide, please. So Lee Worley, department head of the apprenticeship and journeyman upgrading program, is embarking on constant change within our world-class training system. We've got training centers across Canada and the United States, training literally thousands of new ironworkers to take on a career in the trades. And it's a partnership between us and the contractor to educate those members. Next slide. So what I'm hearing much of and related to work-ready workforce is a concept where employees that are dispatched from local unions have a prescribed number of certifications or credentials that demonstrate achievement and a certain level of workplace employability skills. For example, that may be a trade certification, fall protection, elevated work platform, H2S Alive, confined space awareness, welding qualifications. So again, we're embarking on a regional response to contractors' needs. And one other question that we have here for a poll is, contractors, do you support the NCSO program? Yes, no, not sure. And what is the National Construction Safety Officer program? And thanks, Wayne, for posting the results. I'm really surprised that 81% of you support this program, and 13% of you said that it's not sure. So next slide. Just a little bit of background information on what the NCSO program is. The preamble to this is the Safety and Health Department also develops and promotes programming related to safety and health in addition to apprenticeship training. So one of the more recent challenges and discussions that we've been having involves and relates to ironworker supervisors and the relationship to OHS legislation. In the majority of jurisdictions, the foreman is designated as a frontline supervisor, part of the management level of management. Therefore, their role assumes responsibility under the employer. One of the programs that contractors may consider as part of developing competency for supervisors is the NCSO program. Promoting ironworkers from within your company to engage in the safety and health development and maintenance of your management system can be a big advantage. Ironworker leaders, this can also be an opportunity for members to build on their knowledge and skills as technical experts in their field, whether it be structural, reinforcing, ornamental, machinery moving, rigging, etc. So information about the NCSO program can be found by contacting our department or your local safety association. Some of the advantages, sorry, not the advantages, but the program elements in the NCSO, and why having an ironworker embark on the safety journey is it builds their technical expertise around safety and health, utilizing their field experience. And I won't read those out. You can see the compulsory elements of the training across the country, including legislation, emergency preparedness, hazard ID, auditing, etc. And there's other options for further training. So this is a nice stepping stone for someone that's an ironworker that may want to reach out into the safety field. Next slide, please. So I'm going to ask that the district council presidents activate their video and their audio, and Steve as well. So as you're doing that, we did have a couple of questions earlier on that related to our discussion. And one of the questions was, involving, and I'm going to be looking for some help here. When is a vertical member not considered a column? Is it any vertical member, height, weight, or something else? I think this relates back to your discussion around the deadly dozen, Steve.
Okay, Jeff, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That same question came up here when we had requirements for columns. And the way that we addressed it here, we worked with OSHA on this, is anything less than, I think it's 6 feet tall and X amount of pounds, and don't quote me, I think it's 300 pounds, is considered to be a post, not a column, okay? So that question came up back in 2002, and we were able to address that. So that's the answer, 200 pounds and a height.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from, I'm sorry, I have to lean in to read it. Can you advise whether the district councils have considered safety incident KPI per local with incidents being reported from employers or contractors' hours coming from locals? Could this, could do this by industry type, structural reinforcing or other? And that's from Lyle C. I think we did have a discussion about this a number of years ago, and how we can bolster good data from our contractors so that we can accurately address these issues. If it's a certain sector, body part, sort of break down where our incidents are happening and what tasks, so that we can address it and share that with other contractors that are doing similar work. I'm not sure, Steve. I'm gonna ask that maybe you chime in on that one, and along with the district council presidents. What are your thoughts?
Of course, of our tracking system that we have now through not only fatalities but disabling injuries, gives us interaction to find out if we have any serious injuries or disabling injuries, that we get feedback from the local unions. Okay, so that's one way we track them. And then also, of course, by word of mouth, that we had a serious incident. Of course, we want to put that in the data as well. But I'm not sure, as far as the district councils, what kind of follow-up and data that they collect in-house. I'll have to defer to them.
Okay.
So
Kevin,
Jeff, just
Colin,
on that
Jimmy?
item there, on a follow-up to Steve, we don't have a KPI for it. It's something that obviously we take very seriously, and would like to see awards given out to everybody for a KPI achievement of a zero injury kind of year. But the experience rate of each individual owner, client, contractor in Ontario anyways is a confidential thing. We get reports to our Industrial Health and Safety Association of the aggregate monthly number of injuries, and then the classification of those injuries and or fatalities. But they don't specify even the trade. In most cases, they just say, IW, mean injured worker, not iron worker. And obviously we can track and quantify things like that, but it doesn't necessarily pertain to the ironworker world. And we get those ad hoc through our own internal communications with our members and various, contractors who will let that information come our way. But we'd be happy to, to start working towards that if we could get the best metrics from all across Canada for all of our employers. So.
Right. And I think
Jeff?
Yes, sorry.
Jeff, I had one more comment I'd like to make. It's real important that we all be notified immediately of a serious incident, starting with the hierarchy of controls there, Kevin, district council presidents, business managers, and we have to be notified. And I don't know if General President Dean is still on the line, but he's reiterated several times about notifying headquarters of any serious incidents. wants to be the first to be notified, not the last. And of course, the safety department wants to be notified so that we can help, not point fingers, but help. And we've all learned from many years of experience in this in our organization that things on a project can go away quickly, okay? And we get down to forensics and measurements, documents, whether it's rigging failure or whatever, and we all have to work together to get the facts right without pointing blame so that we understand the true causation there without anything being misrepresentative, misconstrued, or any evidence destroyed during the process. So it goes part of the communication, all of us working together, you know, to respond to serious incidents in the workplace. And I didn't know if General President Dean was still on the line and wanted to make a comment.
President Dean, are you able to comment? I'm not sure that he's available at this time.
Okay.
Jimmy, Colin, would you like to weigh in on this?
For myself, I would say it's a great idea. You know, in compliance with the KPI to try to get all the data for each local. I would. That's a very good suggestion. And right now, we don't have any way to, like Kevin was saying, to get the numbers from any level of construction and safety and health. That we don't really have the access. Maybe we will have to look into it and bound with the building trades. They mostly have access to those information, and we could certainly add it on the KPI and look into it, what if it's possible, and to bond it. It's a very good idea.
All right, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to have the district councils weigh in on your specific areas with your dialogue between the local unions, the membership, and the signatory contractor community, your clients and your owners. What are some of the pain points that you're hearing in relationship to safety and health? And I'll start out with Colin Daniels with the District Council of Western Canada. Colin?
Well, I canvassed the local unions. I spoke to some contractors, and I reached out to some owner group people. And the biggest thing coming back out of Western Canada is with all these high-profile projects that have gone in the potash industry and in the oil sands, and now happening in BC and in Manitoba at the dams. The biggest problem that we were seeing as ironworkers is what we call trade stacking, where they have fast track program in this fast life that we live in. Everything is wanted to be done on accelerated projects and accelerated schedules, and you're running 3 shifts, 21 days on, 7 days off, and coverage 24/7. So with that, you're going to have a lot of people in areas, and what we call trade stacking is when you have other trades upon other trades of people. It increases objects that are falling. Dropped objects seems to be a huge problem on these sites. And I mean, ironworkers, when we're doing our erection sequences, I mean, we're banging away. And, red tape for ribbing off an area doesn't unfortunately work as a force field, and things are, you know, washers drops or some small objects drop, and it's unfortunate that, you know, guys are losing their jobs over this stuff and people are getting injured. So I mean, what we really need is some sort of legislation or site policies that outlaw people working underneath our erection sequences and stuff that we're doing, and giving control to the contractor that's performing these activities to sign off on areas that are safed out, to allow other workers in that area versus trying to ram schedule down people's throat. And then it creates lots of uncertainty, and people are walking on eggshells on the iron, scared for their jobs if they drop a washer, and it's an unfair position to put our members in. So that was something that came up on several of the replies when I canvassed our membership in Western Canada.
Thank you, Colin. Duly noted. I noticed that Wayne's got a slide up with some of our shop members and in the manufacturing industry. Is there any comments from your area, Colin, with our local 643 or 712?
As far as the shipyards,
838, sorry.
the shipyards go, 643, they got it locked down there. They have a small crew. They do very well. There's not much coming out of that area, but out of the bigger shops in 712, 805, and 838, they're seeing a lot of lack of training when it comes to rigging and material handling in the shops. That's something that I think we could strive to do better inside these shops, is delivering a little bit more training. And I mean, we're relying on the owners to reach out to us to deliver the training. Maybe we could bridge that gap a little better and get inside these shops and start offering it instead of having them ask for it. So that's something that I'll strive to do better on my end, is getting some delivery to this done in that aspect in the shops.
Yeah, and thank you for, I neglected local 805 in Alberta. So thanks for that, Colin. Anything to add? I'll move on to the Ontario District Council. Kevin?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, we have some of the similar issues that Colin is in terms of a check-in, but most of our items as far as the current industry challenges are revolving around COVID these days, in terms of contractors getting into that supply chain to find the appropriate PPE to again go and manage the job site new, like they have never done before. So where and when they can't get that obviously pushes them in scheduling and attending to work, but also on those higher density jobs that already have significant challenges. The spacing that comes with COVID restrictions on the work site has really put a lot of tool time challenges on production for on the job, and we're hearing that pretty loudly, especially in our nuclear sector. There's a couple of refurbs that are going on. It's already hard enough to work in those in any environment, and then you throw COVID on it, and it's really affecting productivity just in terms of that yoke that's put in front of jumping in to help somebody out or whatever you normally do, and then having to stand back and say, oh, can't do that. So that's their challenge at this point. Open area sites with no other trades and no access egress have had no issues whatsoever outside of the normal supply chain scheduling of their steel and or rebar. But when you get tight with other trades or tight in enclosed facilities, then those are the challenges. And it's mostly to do with COVID in Ontario.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kevin. And Jimmy, would you like to add something, please?
Well, on my side, I would say I'm really lucky. I've been going around with all my business manager, business agent, looking in for a problem. And back in the day, I would say we mostly, solve the problem with all the Construction Act on each different province. And I've been digging into it. Each of the act, they definitely have a different aspect to secure a worker on the job site, especially iron worker. If you're looking into in Quebec right now, we have the CNSST. This association is a safety and health in Quebec right now. On the code, they I would say has a example. They resolve a problem with the Nelson stud. They put something together. And the code mention anybody, any production part, or I would say putting the people in danger, the worker on the steel, they need to have a walkway. So the way they wrote that act is just providing the person to not working on the studs and avoiding this situation and find another way or another solution to get access to the problem. And also the same thing have realized in Nova Scotia, they have the same sort of stuff for the Nelson stud, but it's in the contract. So having this in the contract, it's a very good thing. It's just improving the work on the job site. and also to make sure our member will be safe, because every weld needs to be done on the job site for the Nelson stud. There's different aspect. I have seen the way they work in the CNSST, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland. It's pretty much the same thing. They want to resolve the problem at the source first, meaning the fabrication. After that, it's probably put something collectively. If you're working on height, you want to put a net, safety net, to ensure that the worker is safe. And then after that, the individual protection. They want to try to at least they don't want to get anybody on the harness or being tied. The first reflex on those acts is get the problem fixed at the source if we can avoid those problems. So that being said, we've been very lucky on the east side. We have 2 persons sitting down on the board, different committee. It's David Blanchet, business agent of Local 711. He's been sitting down at the ASP construction committee for revising the sheet metal decking system, the way to install it. So this is very good for us. I'm really happy to hear that. And also we have Guy Leblanc. He's been sitting down at the NBCC Association of New Brunswick. So having these people at the table helping us to improving the trades and changing things, it's very nice. So yeah, that's what I have for my district council.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Kevin and Colin, for sharing those comments. We did have a question from Kevin Burns at headquarters. What best practices can the district council president share where locals have had success in getting journeyman ironworkers to come back for training upgrades? Anyway. I know it's a challenge, right? To once somebody turns out, you know, other than safety certifications and upgrades that are mandated through a time constraint or a change in a program, what are some other things that you could say as a district council president would be helpful in getting those journeymen, journey people back into the training realm?
Just the success we had. It's been a while since I've been in this realm. I was coordinator at 721 from 1999 until about 2007, and the best success we had there was to put on the classes that most aptly resembled the job site in which they needed the upgrading in. So to the extent we had curtain wall mock-ups that were hands-on, installable, and then massageable and that sort of stuff, then that is what kind of drew and kept people, and then a good instructor, obviously, to take them through that and give them a really, an excellent experience outside of just sitting in a classroom potentially talking about it. So to the extent we have hands-on, like the welding upgrading is always open and always well attended, but every other thing that you put on, where and when it resembled actual job site hands-on experience, and the ability to fail there and then learn your mistakes in that kind of a class, those were well attended. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Colin?
Well, for Western Canada, with the 4 provinces that we cover here, is 2 of them being compulsory trades and 2 of them not. In order to travel and to go into other provinces, we've had success in putting on Red Seal upgrading courses to gear ironworkers to become interprovincial ironworkers, so they can travel outside of their traditional jurisdictional lines. So we had quite a, when I was business manager with Local 771, that was one of the things that we focused on, was getting a lot of our guys that were, seasoned ironworkers back into the classroom atmosphere to get their Red Seals. And a lot of these guys didn't even have apprenticeship programs when they broke out. They just got their hours and signed off on, and they were deemed qualified through the provincial tests that the hall would put on. But now with the way the life and this everything's changing here, the best practice for us was to get guys in the door to get their Red Seals so they can go and work in other jurisdictions and make the scale that they're entitled to. That was a big push that we had in Saskatchewan especially. So that's what I can speak to.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I had a
And just
comment,
before-
please.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
That's a good question by Kevin Burns. We learned from experience when the new steel erection standard went into effect back in 2001 that we had a whole lot of new procedures that the guys that have been around for 25 years needed to be trained on. We had multiple lift rigging procedure called Christmas string iron that had specific requirements in it. Our guys needed to know, okay? Our supervisors needed to know about site conditions, anchor bolt requirements, double connections. And so it required and prompted us to reach out to our membership and have all these training and upgrading things, as Kevin Bryanton mentioned a few minutes ago, and it really opened up the door, okay? And that also got embedded through the National Training Fund and Lee Worley's department. So good question, Kevin Burns. I think with all these things that we want to pursue on shear studs, on trade stacking, it prompts us to get members back in some way, shape, or form to instruct them on these things. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. So I've been notified that we have about 10 minutes left, and we do have a couple of things that we want to finish up to share with our participants. If I could get Wayne to forward the slide deck to the best practices. I want to just share with you a success story. So the structural steel best practices document was developed as a project of the Ironworker Rod Worker Labor Management and Health Safety Committee in Ontario. The seed document developed in Alberta provided a guide for the topics that were important to the industry in an effort to take steel erection safety to the next level. Jack Mesley, president of the Ontario Erectors Association, seconded the expertise of Brad DeBoer, OHS consultant with DeBoer Safety Group, and working with collaboration with the committee. A final document was submitted to the Infrastructure Health and Safety Association post-committee endorsement for inclusion as an update to their existing chapter as a component of their M29 Construction and Health Safety Manual, which, if you haven't seen, I think is the best practices, and I think a lot of provinces and territories could learn a lot from developing a similar manual. This document provides a summary and guidance of the best practice approaches to be considered during structural steel erection projects. We look forward to seeing this entered into Ontario and sharing this across Canada for other jurisdictions to consider for inclusion and development for their regional best practices. The reinforcing industry is also currently considering a similar approach to their work by analyzing the risks, the controls, and guidelines in their efforts to improve safety performance. So I'd ask Kevin Bryanton if you could come back on for a moment. I just want you to provide a comment on the IHSA and the Ironworker relationship in Ontario.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And it's been a long relationship we've had with them over the course of 30 plus years in terms of exchanging our own manuals with their manuals and co-developing and using the best practices of each of our organizations to work out our own redevelopment. So this is another example of just the trade committees for both the Ironworker and the Rod Worker stepping up and putting together for the Ironworker side anyways, the structural steel erection best practices. It took about at least 2.5 to 3 years. So I want to thank Brad and everybody else on that committee who stepped forward to do the lift. But yeah, we just had an excellent relationship there, both at the provincial level and at the trade committee level over the course of, before I came along anyways, and through now, just to glean the best of their very active role in Ontario prevention and safety. So.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I was blessed to be part of that process, and I gleaned a lot of ideas that I think we can share with other jurisdictions across the country. And I just wanted to share with the group that's online here just one example where OSHA Subpart R in the United States 1926 755A1 speaks to something that Steve Rank mentioned earlier, and that all columns shall be anchored by a minimum of 4 anchor rods or anchor bolts. And the ASTM F155-4 covers 3 grades of anchor rods, you know, and these items are the basis for structural steel stability. And the vast majority of anchor rods, as defined under the CSA S16 standard, are used simply to position, level, and secure base plates for loaded columns. So this was something that was introduced a number of years into legislation in the United States, and the committee, quite frankly, was using OSHA as a guideline as we developed our best practices. So next slide, Wayne. So this is just a snip of the relationship to that in the best practices document, where any deviation from a 4-bolt anchor rod pattern should be addressed by a professional engineer and detailed in the site-specific steel erection work plan to identify safe methods for erection. So we just want to make our clients that maybe are not familiar with structural steel erection, the contractors, so that they have a best practice to go from, and the ironworker who's ultimately performing the task, so that everybody's on the same playing field in terms of the best way to carry out work. Due to time constraints, we can't share with you the other, I think there's 40 pages or so, but I wanted to give you one example. Next slide, please. So as we moving towards closure of this webinar, I wanted to ask Steve just to comment on some of the programs that have been developed by the Ironworkers International. Namely, the one that's on your screen is the Voluntary Industrial Hygiene Program and our 3M partnership. Steve?
Okay. Just very briefly, we've had a lot of problems with contractors trying to pay for and assess exposures to members doing heavy welding work. And this came up probably 10, 12 years ago, that we needed to start a program to help our employers identify the levels that our members are being exposed to, and to try to work with them in cost savings and get good data. So we set off and we did about 180 air sample tests on every base metal we could get our hands on: mild steel, stainless steel, galvanized steel. We also used every kind of consumable we could get with rod and wire. And also we went to indoor conditions and outdoor conditions to do air sampling tests, so that we could share these representative air sample tests with members and contractors throughout North America. But if any contractor tries to do this by themselves, it gets to be a $10,000 bill really quick. And that would be about 12,000 Canadian. So anyway, we started a program, a voluntary industrial hygiene program, where any contractor can call Jeff in Canada and to say, can you guys help me on doing some air sample tests in my workplace? And Jeff will say, absolutely. So we have retained a third-party industrial hygiene expert to help work with our contractors at our expense through our budget to defer costs that they would have in trying to do this. So the bottom line is we're taking away any excuse in the workplace not to address airborne welding fumes and metals that our guys could be sucking in. On a big picture there in the middle there, you'll see a PAPR. We're working with 3M through thanks of Wayne Cressup and Jeff to get 3M. They've been very generous with us to provide us with these hoods where it has powered air that comes in, and there's no way you can suck in welding fumes wearing one of these. The feedback that we've gotten, the guys in the shop love them, okay? So these are things that Jeff can help all our contractors out in the field on air sampling tests, PPE, relationship with 3M. It's all there, or it's getting developed in a better way. So thanks to Wayne and Jeff both on this program.
And thank you, Steve, for taking the lead on respiratory health. It's something that is very important, and we look forward to this program advancing in Canada. So as we close out, in respect of people's time, I'm just going to ask for a couple more minutes. We've got a couple of updates. Before we do that, Wayne, the next poll question is, I am interested in participating in future Ironworker Impact hosted safety webinars and roundtable meetings. Yes, no, not sure. We're looking for some feedback on whether the webinars are something that we want to do in the short term, because of the world that we're in with COVID. We want to engage with our audience and our stakeholders. It's important to the ironworkers, it's important to the contractors. And wow, 100%. That's just a real pleasure to see. So thank you for that. Next slide. Steve, please chime in as we finish out the webinar here. We want to make people aware that we have another exciting webinar next week with Wayne Cressup. And again, thanks, Wayne, for the behind the scenes work. We had to go to Plan B. Wayne was going to be visually available, but he's running the PowerPoint and doing all this behind the scenes. So as in the Ironworker way, we do what needs to be done. And Wayne will be hosting What Does It Take to Pre-Qualify for Industrial Projects? And I think this will be very interesting. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. Steve, you want to add something to that?
I do. Just like we couldn't have a better person like you to address all this stuff across Canada, we couldn't have a better person to address pre-qualification than Wayne Cressup. He understands incident rates, recordable rates, all those things that contractors have to need and manage in order to be pre-qualified to get in these big industrial projects. So we're really pleased that Wayne is going to be busting out, offering this next Wednesday, the 29th, to unveil this, to give any assistance to contractors about how do I better prepare to get pre-qualified to work in this refinery, okay? So we're really pleased with Wayne's background with the industrial sector, his unique expertise in incident reporting and recording, that he's going to be able to do this. So I just encourage all you folks in Canada, you contractors, tune in, okay? The same type of principle things that Wayne's going to be discussing for the lower 50 can still apply to you up there, things about managing your incidents and programs and all that. So please join us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
And our next slide, Steve, stay on the line here. Our next slide, due to our response, it's worthy of noting. I hope I got the date right, Steve. September 1st is our Safety and Health Roundtable.
You do have it correct. You do. And I would like to invite everyone online to register for this. I know Jeff will be putting out some more announcement, him and Sandra, here shortly. We want all you guys online. I would really like for James and Colin to join in and talk about trade stacking, talk about shear studs and what we can do up there, which is near and dear to our heart, and we can make it happen. I am completely confident in our help up there, our leadership, that we can address any issues that come as a result of these calls or the Safety and Health Roundtable meeting.
Thank you. Wayne, next slide. We also have a brand new program. Steve put this together last week, the Lunch and Learn program.
Just briefly, because we regret that we had to cancel our very first safety summit, District Council Safety Summit in Calgary, Alberta, featuring Colin there. We had to cancel it due to COVID. So we have to replace that something. We still have to be able to communicate with these different locals and provinces. So all we want is to throw this out so that every province could have a lunch and learn for 1 hour You call in, you tell us what the issues are, okay? So we're just encouraging you folks to call in. Jeff will be setting these up and announcing these for Canada. And it gives us a chance to call in to say, I got a project coming up, I'm concerned, or I just started a project, I'm having these safety issues. So it gives us a chance to help put fires out before they become a problem, okay? So we want to be proactive instead of reactive. So 1 hour, we're here to listen to you. We're not there to make any kind of presentations. It's an open forum. Eat your lunch, put your feet up on the desk, and call us and tell us what's on your mind. That's what it's all about.
Well, and that's very timely, Steve. Thank you. That alarm that you heard is the coffee bell and the end of this webinar. So next slide. Just want to thank the panel, Kevin Branton, James Bissaw, Colin Daniels, and of course you, Steve. General President Eric Dean, thank you very much for joining us. And a shout out to our crew, to Wayne Cressup, Sandy Lusuka, and Christy Rose. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.